Impressed. And, Albert, first time you heard Alfred sing, what'd you think?
I am just so impressed. I can't believe that's coming out of... How old are you?
I'm 18, just turned 18.
Wow.
Amazing.
Howie, before we move on, I just want to wish my brother Alex a happy birthday. Happy birthday,
Alex.
Alex, and many, many more. I love you.
Excellent, great.
Thank you.
All right, here's where I became aware of this story. It was in the New York Post that I saw it. The title was Plane, Sight, Flight. And it was a story about Albert Rizzi. And Albert, for people unfamiliar with the story, talk about exactly what happened that night in your own words.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for having me here today. What happened in my own words, I got onto the plane, and when I first stepped onto the plane, the lady, the flight attendant, said, oh, I wish I had known you were getting on the plane. I would have saved the bulkhead. They tend to like to put the blind people in front of the bulkheads, and but I like to sit wherever I want, so did a lot of my colleagues. There was no seat there, so we went to the back of the plane. I went to my seat. She took me to that seat. And then it started to fall apart. She wanted to have me stow the dog under a seat, and I didn't have a seat in front of me per se, because it was a banquette or a bench seat, if you would. Two to the right, two to the left, and me in the aisle. Lady next to me, Mary Comfort, my new bestest friend. She said, "Oh, put the dog under my seat." Now, I don't know how many people that you might travel with would give up their personal space that they paid good money for, but she did. Dog went under the seat. Lady went up front. We were on the tarmac for about an hour and 43 minutes before we turned the plane around. But about maybe 40 minutes into it, the dog had snuck out, wanted to sit with Daddy, had his head on my foot, and his hindquarters were under Mary's feet. His head was under my feet. Never once off-leash, never once running up and down, never once doing anything other than what he's doing right now, which is under the table sleeping. She came back and she said, "Sir, I told you have to stow that dog before we take off." And I'm like, well, you know, I'll give it another shot. It came out again. He snuck out, whatever. Now we're about maybe an hour and a half into waiting to take off. My partner Brian was there at the airport waiting for us. I'm like, dude, you got to go home. We're not even leave. We haven't even left Philadelphia yet. So she comes back again. The same thing happens. And she gets really insistent this time. And I remember saying, and I thought I was the only one that had heard this until Kurt Butke, another new buddy of mine, had said, "Oh yeah, I remember her saying that." I had said to her, "Why are you being so evil?" And she said, "If I were evil, I would just turn this plane around now." So we got to talking, and I told her, "I can't do what you're asking me to do. You're not giving me the tools to succeed. There is no seat. The dog is not ready to sit there for an hour and a half. I mean, he's 82 pounds. I get fidgety in a plane." So I told her, in no plain uncertain terms, "Why don't you just go sit down? When you're ready to take off, give me a high sign. I'll shove him under the seat. We'll take off. 45 minutes later, we'll be in Long Island, and it will be a distant memory." She didn't like that. And next thing I know, the plane's being turned around. None of us knew why we were sitting on the tarmac, and still don't. And in walked this really, really nice guy, and I hope they wind up giving him a promotion. His name was Lamar Brooks. Lamar came in and was very polite, and he said, "Mr. Rizzi, may I help you with your bags?" I thought they were trying to be nice to the blind guy. I figured, okay, I get to get off first, whatever, but I'll carry my own bags. I picked up the, what do you call that, the overhead compartment. I got my bag, and I noticed right away Lamar closed the compartment. So I scratched my head, and I said, okay. I took another step. I didn't hear anybody else getting up. I didn't hear any other overhead compartments being opened up. And I said, "Excuse me, am I the only one getting off this plane?" To which he responded, "We'll discuss that inside." Well, I didn't like that. I basically said, what I said was a couple of F-bombs, a couple of no we won'ts. I told her off, I told him off, and went down the stairs. You know, I was pissed. I was not a happy camper. I had, like, I call it the walk of shame. Between the time that I walked down the stairs and into the terminal was probably the worst experience, and the time that I spent in the terminal since losing my eyesight, since I was told I'd never see again. So we go inside. I'm ripping him a new one. And at one point he says, "Mr. Rizzi, please stop yelling at me. I think I understand what happened." So that got my attention. He had said to his colleague Linda, that was basically to his right, I'm standing in front of him, and he said to her, when I walked onto that plane, there was no tension in the room. There was nothing that could have been interpreted as something that would have caused the flight attendant to turn the plane around. Everybody was pretty content. The dog was sleeping. And I said, yeah, and I also self-identify as a blind traveler with a guide dog. So it gives them a little bit more leeway to make arrangements for all of my fellow passengers, my dog and I. I happen to like the bulkhead. If they can make that arrangement, I'm taking it. But then my ears really perked up when he said, but Linda, you have to understand something. There were other seats on that plane, at least 6 or 7 seats. She could have moved one person and give Mr. Rizzi and the dog their own seat. And Linda says, he could have had their own row? You mean the dog could have had his own seat? And he's like, yes. Now, I feel, exonerated. I'm like, great, I'm getting back on that plane. But unbeknownst to me, what's happening in the plane at the same time that I was having this conversation with Linda and Lamar, everybody on that plane was ripping that woman a new one. No, they were. There was a guy on the plane, Chris, and I'm not even going to pronounce his last name because I haven't got it committed to memory yet, but it begins with a P. He is one of 4 brothers. He's got a blind brother. Mary got up, so Chris was saying something, Mary was saying something, Ted was saying something, Kurt was saying something. There was a bunch of different people there just really voicing their upset. Vernon, there was Frank, a bunch of, I have all these new friends. Barbara and Arthur, who live out in Aquabog. This is crazy. And Barbara and Arthur were coming back from Europe after being on a first-class flight for 24 hours to get back to New York.
And the bottom line was, they were so infuriated, everybody got off the plane and joined you on a bus to Long Island.
That's one of the things. That was the most remarkable thing. When they all came in off the plane after having an argument on the plane, I heard Lamar say, oh my God. And I thought for sure they were bringing handcuffs and I was being taken away for my dog. I was freaking out, Howie. It was stupid.
Yeah.
And in came these 35 people with upset, similar, if not equal to mine.
They felt that they were damaged as well. They felt that they were that this airline acted totally inappropriate.
Right.
And they didn't want to stand for it.
No, and they actually that concentration of humanity and that concentration of that many people doing the right thing was so overwhelming that the worst 43 minutes of my life standing in that terminal turned out to be the most empowering, uplifting moment I have ever experienced. I was speechless.
That's awesome.
I'm never at a loss for words.
All right, we have to take a break, and after the break, we're going to open up the phone lines so people listening can call, and then we want to bring David Blumen into the conversation, and we want to talk about how people with disabilities can be helped in their life by getting involved in sports and good physical fitness. So we're going to ask David to join us in further discussion. But if anyone wants to join in and speak to Albert about what he went through, your two-way WGBB number is 631-888-8811. Again, your two-way WGBB number is 631-888-8811. And then later, after Albert, we have Stryker Corbin and Margaret Marshall coming up to talk about what you should and should not be eating during the Thanksgiving holiday. So even though the holiday's coming, you don't have to pig out and get fat. So they're gonna guide you in the right direction for the holiday. We want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. But again, you want to call and speak to Albert. The number is 631-888-8811. We're taking a break. I am Halftime Howie. This is Broadcasting on the Beach with Halftime Howie coming to you live from the studios in West Babylon on Long Island's first and oldest radio station, AM 1240, WGBB.